couple years ago, while I was bush hogging the pasture here behind me, I made a snap decision that could have been a little risky, but it turned out to be one of the best decisions that I made. I'm Rob from Dowdle Family Farms, and we raise beef, pasture pigs, and honeybees on our farm, and we do it in a way that produces ecosystems that are beneficial for soil life, that are beneficial for our land, but also beneficial for the people around us. In this video, let's talk about the importance of trees on a regenerative farm, how we've gotten where we are, and what our plans are. So the decision that I made while I was bush hogging was to allow these willow trees behind me here to grow in the pasture and not cut them down. The problem with willows in a pasture is that they don't die after you bush hog them. So if we continue to let them grow and then cut them off, the tree stobs can tear up tires on tractors, and it can be really detrimental for our equipment. But I wanted to try leaving them for a couple reasons. First, this is a wet area of the farm, and willows do use a lot of water. The other thing that I wanted to do, though, was offer a little bit of shade in these paddocks for the pigs, and it turned out to work out beautifully. As you can probably tell by some of the leaves here, the willows have lower limbs, and they help shade pigs at a very early age in the tree's life cycle. Willows can also provide some fodder for beneficial insects and even honeybees in the early parts of the year. Now, long term, I don't want willows in the pasture. They don't provide a whole lot of shade for larger livestock like cows, but for our pigs, they provide a lot of shade early on in their lives compared to oaks or chestnuts or any other kind of even a faster growing tree. Now, I left 8 or 10 of these trees growing. They provided a lot of good shade this past summer. So in one growing season, they performed really well for shade. Behind the camera, I've also left some willows growing in another wet spot, and just to provide the opportunity for us to graze our pigs over there in another couple years if we decide to do that. If you follow our channel much, you probably know that we're in this process of regenerating 10 acres of this field with cover crops and livestock. Most of the livestock that I'm grazing on this part of the farm is with pigs, although we do run our cows in here from time to time. Pigs need a lot of shade, they don't sweat, so they have a difficult time cooling down. So when I decided to start planting some more trees, I started looking up what kind of trees will provide some good shade early on in their life. So I wanted to have trees that would provide several different benefits for our livestock operation, not just providing shade for our pigs. So things that we use on the farm, we do raise cows, so having taller growing trees, having good trees that would produce a lot of timber, decades down the road would be nice, of course. Oaks provide a lot of benefit there, but also having trees that will provide some forest mast, like oaks, hickories, beeches, even soft masting trees like plums, persimmons, mulberries, and those kind of trees are beneficial as well. If I can find trees that are helpful for beneficial insects, that's another plus. The more beneficial insects that we attract, the more benefit we get from birds, but we also attract with beneficial insects that'll help eat fly larvae and help destroy those more destructive insects. And of course, if we can get trees that provide good shade and good fodder for our honeybees, that's another plus as well. In terms of nectar production in our area, in January and February, we have a lot of good nectar producing trees like elm and especially maples, red maples, silver maples, and sugar maples. Then we move on into later parts in the spring and we get other good nectar producing trees. But in late May, early June, and on into July, we don't have a whole lot of good nectar producing trees or plants on our farm or in our area. So if we can have things like chestnuts also that produce nectar at a time of the year when other trees are not blooming, it's an added benefit. When I started looking for different resources and trees that I could plant that would work in our environment, I ended up turning to a company called Native Nurseries that's actually local to me, but they also do a lot of mail order business. I originally encountered Native Nurseries 2 or 3 years ago and purchased some chestnut trees from them. Purchased the chestnut trees from Native Nurseries a couple years ago because they were much cheaper than anyone else was selling them. But the nursery has a lot of really good resources on different types of trees, where to plant them, how soon you can expect fruit or mast from the trees, and I really like what they're doing. And I want to plant as many of the native trees as I can. So I planted a few oaks, mostly some hybrid, naturally occurring oaks. We have oaks growing all over the farm. Why would I plant more? That's a very good question. But they did have some hybrid oaks that I wanted to give a try. They also had some mulberry trees. Mulberries produce a lot of fruit. They grow rapidly, and the fruit has a lot of nutrients in it. And of course, I really like helping the wildlife, songbirds, and many others as well. If I get to feed the pigs out of it, that's great too. I also purchased some sawtooth oaks. Now, sawtooth oaks are not native here in the U.S. They're native in Asia, but I do like that they grow tall. I like that they grow fast and that they produce a lot of mast. Our neighbors have some and they perform really well, so I wanted to try those as well. But the thing that I'm the most excited about are some plum trees. Let me take you over here to them. Now, to my left on the ground here is a pig fence. It's a dividing fence that runs all the way to the woods. On each side of it, I've planted a selection of different trees. For the most part, what I've planted here are Mexican plums. It's a soft masting tree. They grow tall, and according to the Native Nursery's YouTube channel, the parent trees that they get a lot of the seed stock from kind of grow out like plums. They're not bushy, but they're more like a tall tree that branches out. Something like that should provide a lot of shade, and it should provide it pretty soon. And they say that they can start producing mast as early as 3 or 4 years after planting. We'll just have to see about that. Again, those are going to be really good shade trees. I planted them about 6 or 8 feet from this fence so that I can still run underneath the electric fence with my lawnmower, maintain around the trees. When I planted each tree, we dug the hole. I threw a shovel full of compost from our pig pens in there, and then I drove some of these red stakes into the ground with a post driver, and then used a 5-foot tree tube. Native Nurseries sells a 4-foot tree tube that I like. I think this is the same brand. I did purchase it somewhere else, but it's a 60-inch tree tube. And the reason I did that is because if we're going to have them in our cattle pastures, I wanted something with a little bit more height to keep not only the deer but also our cows from grazing them as well. Now, in each paddock I'm planting some of these lower growing trees that'll provide shade for pigs pretty soon, but I'm also planting some of the larger trees, chestnuts, oaks, mulberries, and many others that should provide some shade later in life. I think I've got some catalpa trees coming, and of course catalpas are great for wildlife. They're great for fish bait and everything else too. While I do not necessarily want a silvopasture type system out here in these fields, what I would like is a few rows of trees alternating back and forth to provide some shade on the sides of the fields, but also to help break up the wind and to help keep things a little bit cooler. But I still plan on growing our cover crops out in the middle of the pastures. So for the last 2 or 3 weeks, we've been planting a lot of trees. Overall, we planted 70 or 80 trees, and that's just in about 10 acres. I do plan on planting more trees in all of our pastures. Even though we do want clear pastures that are easy to bush hog, we also want shade in parts of them. Over the next several years, I hope to keep planting trees throughout the farm that'll have cooling effects throughout the pastures, that'll provide immediate shade for our livestock, but trees that will also help improve the habitat for beneficial insects, wildlife, and offer feed for our livestock as well. Take care. I hope you have a great day.